Hi everyone, this is Terry. Today we're getting started with our panel. Now I do want to talk to you about a couple of different things before you set up. The first thing you'll want is your panel. Now the reason I chose this panel was honestly because a member of our group who's a dealer had this panel and she quilted it, and I just thought it was beautiful. I don't tend to buy very many panels, but what's so nice about this one is that it has some nice bold objects in it, and I'm calling those the things like these pumpkins. You got the birds that are so pretty, and these big leaves. All of these call for some what I call outline stitching around them that will give me a trapunto look for my quilt. I think it'll really come out nicely if I do that. And the other thing that you'll see is I've managed to pick up some fabric that matches this. So this is coordinating fabric. And at first I had planned to put these leaves on the inside next to my panel because I thought that would really look nice. Because this is so dark, I thought this would give it a break. I like it the other way, and the reason I do is on the lengthwise grain of these, and they're non-directional prints, which is really important because you get a bigger bang for your buck that way. You have the ability to match up what looks like a fence board here with the fence board in the panel. So I'll be cutting those on the length of grain. Most of the time I cut my sashing strips on the width of the grain, but it really depends. So there's really no right and wrong rules here. When you get your panel, what you need to do is you need to look at how it was cut. Most panels are not cut straight, and it doesn't mean that somebody didn't do something right. It just means that it's very hard to cut, and particularly across the width of the grain if you're not using rulers or that, with something like this, because the fabric is going to shift and move. So what I'm going to do is measure as far out as I can get on both sides and see how much of this black border I can reserve, and I'll trim the rest. You need to remove your selvage edge. This is a selvage edge. Now it doesn't have any writing on it, but that's what it is. So that needs to be cut off, and then you need to make sure that the top edges are the same. And what I would probably do is, in looking at this, just because I think your eye is drawn to certain things, I'd measure this width. That would be the width that I would cut up here, because I want those two sizes to be the same or symmetrical. The other thing I want to show you is a panel that I wouldn't choose for the way that I'm going to quilt this. It doesn't mean it's not a beautiful panel, because it is. I bought it, so it has to be pretty. It's just adorable. And you can see that it has a small print. Now this is really made for all over quilting as far as I'm concerned. So I would use all over quilting on this, and I happen to like Emily Scott if I'm going to do it on my machine. If I was going to do this on my quilting machine that I have, which is a Baby Lock Cornet, which is basically a handy quilter, and it's on what's called a Littlefoot frame. What I would do with that is I would use a pantograph or free motion. And I'm not the best at free motion, but I can stipple and do some other designs. So if you're interested in this panel, it's called Warm Wish, and it's by Maywood Studios, and I want you to look at that. Is that not the cutest thing? It's just so pretty and whimsical, and I loved all of the print on this. And you can see there's even some little designs over here on the side. So you have to think, when you have a panel like this, what are you going to do with these? Because these are going in an opposite direction. Do you cut them and use them as a strip for a border? That's what I would do. And let's see if they're on both sides. And they're not. So you really just need to think about that. They probably have a pattern or something that you can use. Now, when you're quilting, you need to have a cutting mat. And I took my cutting mat off so that the lines wouldn't be distracting with the fabric. But you need a good cutting mat. You need good rulers. And I tend to like Quilter Select simply because it doesn't move. Now, sometimes it's hard for you to see with dark fabrics, though, with this ruler. And for that reason, I also have Creative Grids. And you can see the Creative Grids ruler has the white marks. There are some other good ones that are out there. I also like to use good rotary cutters. I happen to like Quilter Select. My 45 millimeter is downstairs right now, where I've been making another wall hanging. And I just got this one. So many of you are getting a chance to attend the Floriani event. It is an amazing rotary cutter. And it's so easy for you to change the blades on it. I buy replacement blades. If you're left-handed or right-handed, it doesn't matter. In fact, sometimes I'll change hands cutting just because I'm lazy about moving fabric with angles. The other thing that you need, when I measure for quilting, I tend to measure using my rulers because they're not going to move. But you can use these types of tapes that are bonded, and you can use a measuring tape like this to get a semi-accurate measurement. What you need to do is you need to take more than one measurement on quilting. So when you're working on sashing, and I'll show you that, you're going to take 2 measurements. You'll take, and particularly when you piece, you're going to divide those 2 numbers by 2, and that's what you would cut for sashing. Now when we're dealing with a panel, it will probably be a one-time measurement, and that will be what we will use. I use binding clips as well, and I like to have those binding clips, and those are what I call wonder clips. There are other brands out there that you can use. You may like to pin your fabric. If you do, you can do that, but almost everything that we're going to do, you're going to have in your sewing room right now. Now, on binding is, I usually do most of my bindings for quilts that are like this. I would more than likely bind them on the machine. For my nice quilts, I do finish my bindings by hand. So you can see here, this is an example that I did on a video. Here's one where I just used a serpentine. So this was the front side. Here I showed it using just a straight stitch, and you can see that it went into the seam on the back side. And of course you're going to have your front, your back, and you're going to have your batting. Now, talking about batting and backing, your backing and your batting needs to be at least 4 inches on every side larger than your quilt top. And your quilt top, if you put sashing strips on it, is going to be the full measurement with your sashing strips sewn on. They'll be sewn on with a 1/4 inch seam. I'll show you that at the machine in a separate video. And then I'll show you how we're going to measure the entire quilt so we know how to make a backing. There are several different ways to make backings. There are some people that they're so creative. In fact, I may reach out to one of my friends and ask her for some suggestions, because I tend to make most of my backings solid, but we're going to make a piece backing for this. So we will have a coordinating fabric that will be this kind of color here, green, that's going to be the binding. It may appear in my backing. We'll be making a label, and we'll do all of this on our Luminaire. If you don't own a Luminaire, no worries, because most of what we're going to do, you can do on your machine. And you can do that with free motion. And in some instances, you can do it in sewing as well. So we'll get started at the machine. We're going to go over a couple of techniques on the Luminaire just to make sure everybody has the same knowledge.